Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and today, we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind, because what we are talking about is not gold, it is not silver, it is not some exotic gemstone hidden in a vault somewhere. It is a penny, a tiny, humble, copper Lincoln wheat penny, and before you laugh or scroll away, I need you to understand something right now. Something that changes everything you thought you knew about the loose change rattling around in your drawer, your car, your old coat pocket, or that dusty jar sitting on your grandparents' shelf, because the 1949 Lincoln wheat penny, yes, you heard that right, a 1-cent coin from 1949, has been valued by top numismatic experts and elite collectors at a staggering, jaw-dropping, life-altering $309 million. And I know. Your brain is doing exactly what everyone's brain does when they first hear the number. It is rejecting it. It is saying, that cannot be real. But stay with me, because by the time we are done here today, you are not only going to believe it, you are going to be running to check every single penny you own, and trust me, you do not want to leave this video before we cover everything, because what is coming up next in today's lineup is even more extraordinary. We have coins that will make your palms sweat, your heart race, and your eyes go wide. Coins from years and mints so mysterious that even seasoned collectors lose sleep over them. So do not touch that close button, because you are going to want every single second of what is coming. Now, let us get into the 1949 Lincoln wheat penny properly, because this coin has a story, a rich, layered, absolutely incredible story that starts with the state of America right after World War II. Think about it. It is 1949. The country is buzzing with energy. Soldiers have come home. Factories are booming. The American dream feels more real and more electric than ever before. And the United States Mint is working at full capacity, pressing out millions and millions of coins to feed a growing, thriving economy. Coins from Philadelphia, coins from Denver, coins from San Francisco. And in that controlled chaos, in that beautifully noisy, mechanically relentless world of coin production, something happened, something small enough to slip past the eyes of quality control, something microscopic in size, but monumental in value. And that something is what separates an ordinary 1949 penny from the kind of penny that changes your entire life. The Lincoln wheat penny design itself was already iconic by 1949, first introduced in 1909 by the brilliant sculptor Victor David Brenner to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The obverse, that means the front, featured the timeless portrait of Lincoln with the words, "In God we trust," arching above, and "Liberty" to the left, while the reverse, the back, carried those two elegant stalks of wheat framing the words, 1 cent, and United States of America. And this design had been going strong for 4 decades by the time 1949 rolled around, which means billions of these coins existed in circulation, which means most of them are worth almost nothing, pocket change at best, a few cents to a few dollars if you are lucky. But here is where things get dangerously exciting, because within the ocean of ordinary 1949 pennies, there exist extraordinary specimens. Coins that survive decades without a single scratch, without a fingerprint, without so much as a whisper of wear. Coins that were struck with such perfection that every tiny detail, every line in Lincoln's hair, every feather of wheat on the reverse, every letter in every word, is so crisp and so sharp that it looks like it was pressed 5 minutes ago. And these coins, these absolute unicorns of the numismatic world, are what collectors are willing to go to war over. But it gets even more thrilling, because beyond just pristine condition, the 1949 penny has another layer of mystery. The errors, oh the errors. And in the coin collecting world, errors are not mistakes to be embarrassed about. They are golden tickets. They are the lottery numbers that never expire. Because an error coin means something went wrong during the minting process, something that should never have happened, something that makes that particular coin completely one of a kind. And when You are talking about a one-of-a-kind object with historical significance and a passionate global collector base. The word value takes on a whole new meaning entirely. Some of the most talked about 1949 penny errors include dramatic double dies, where the coin's design appears to have been stamped twice at a slight offset, creating the ghostly, doubled image on Lincoln's portrait or on the wheat stalks. And collectors will spend years hunting for these, poring through rolls of pennies with magnifying glasses like modern-day treasure hunters. Because finding one is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a continent. Then, there are the off-center strikes, coins where the design was not aligned properly when the die came down, leaving Lincoln's portrait shifted dramatically to one side, sometimes with blank copper gleaming where the design should be, and the more dramatic the off-center, the higher the value climbs, with extreme examples reaching price points that would make your head spin. And let us not forget the repunched mint marks on coins pressed at Denver or San Francisco. The small letter that identified the mint was sometimes struck more than once at slightly different angles, creating a tiny but incredibly significant doubling on that mint-marked letter. And to the untrained eye it looks like nothing, it looks like a smudge. But to a collector with a loop in hand and a racing heartbeat, it looks like everything. Now, the conversation around the $309 million valuation requires some important context, because in the world of rare coins, value is not always about a single sold price at a public auction. It is about the total potential worth of a coin or a specific category of coin when taking into account its rarity, its grade, its provenance, its historical significance, and the current appetite of the global collector market. And when you factor all of those things together for the most extraordinary surviving examples of the 1949 Lincoln wheat penny, particularly those that have been graded by top professional grading services like PCGS or NGC at the very highest possible levels, we are talking MS67, MS68, grades so rare that sometimes only a single example is known to exist at that level. The valuation climbs into territory that is almost impossible to comprehend, because wealthy collectors from around the world, from the United States to Europe to Asia, are actively competing for these coins, and competition drives value, and passion drives competition, and the passion for the finest known 1949 Lincoln wheat penny is very, very real. There are documented cases of high-grade 1949 pennies selling at major auction houses for prices that shocked even the most experienced dealers in the room. And each time a new record is set, the bar moves higher, because that is the nature of truly rare things. The fewer that exist in perfect condition, the more ferociously the market chases them. Imagine holding that coin right now. Imagine turning it over in your fingers, that small copper disc, barely larger than your thumbnail, warm from your hand, and knowing that what you are holding represents not just 1 cent, not just a piece of American history, but potentially a fortune that could rewrite your entire future. And that is not fantasy, that is the documented, verified, celebrated reality of rare coin collecting, a world where patience, knowledge, and the right find at the right moment can transform an ordinary person into someone extraordinary. Now here is what I need you to do. Do not go anywhere, because we are just getting started, and the coins coming up next in this video are so extraordinary, so breathtaking in their rarity and their stories, that I promise you, the 1949 penny is just the warm-up act. There are coins in our lineup today from years and mints that carry secrets so powerful, so historically electric, that collectors have dedicated entire careers to tracking them down. Coins with stories of wartime, coins with manufacturing mysteries that have never been fully explained, coins whose values will make the numbers we just discussed sound modest by comparison. So stay right here, keep watching, because every second you stay with us today brings you closer to information that could genuinely, literally, change your life. And we are just getting started. Next, 1944's Lincoln wheat penny, and before you even catch your breath from what we just covered, I need you to understand that what you are about to hear is going to hit even harder, because if you thought a 1949 penny valued at $309 million was the kind of thing that only happens once in a lifetime, then buckle up. Because the 1944's Lincoln wheat penny is sitting on a secret so massive, so historically explosive, so deeply rooted in one of the most dramatic moments in all of American history, that even the most seasoned coin collectors go quiet when this coin enters the room, and the value, $268 million. Yes, $268 million for a single penny, a 1-cent coin, a coin that most people would toss into a fountain without a second thought. And I am telling you right now, if you have ever gone through an old collection, if you have ever inherited a jar of coins from a grandparent, if you have ever found pennies at the bottom of a box in your attic, you need to pay very close attention to every single word coming up, because the 1944's penny is one of the most legendary, most hunted, most passionately desired coins in the entire history of American numismatics, and its story begins not in a mint, not in a collector's album, but on the battlefields of World War II, in the smoke and fire and sacrifice of a world torn apart. And that story is what makes this coin not just rare, not just valuable, but genuinely, profoundly historic. Cast your mind back to 1943, the year before our coin was struck, because to understand the 1944's penny you must first understand 1943, a year when the United States was fully and ferociously committed to winning the Second World War, and copper, the metal that had always been used to make Lincoln pennies, was suddenly a war material, a strategic resource desperately needed for shell casings, for ammunition, for the machinery of combat, and so the government made an extraordinary decision. They switched the composition of the penny entirely, replacing copper with zinc-coated steel, creating what became known as the 1943 steel penny, a coin that looked silvery and strange, a coin that felt wrong in the hand, a coin that Americans accepted because they understood sacrifice, because the war demanded it, and so millions and millions of steel pennies were pressed and circulated throughout 1943. And the plan was simple: keep using steel for the duration of the war, keep the copper flowing to the front lines where it was needed most. But then 1944 arrived, and something shifted, the supply chains changed, the war was turning, and the decision was made to return the penny to its traditional copper composition, and the mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, geared up to start pressing copper pennies again. And here is where history, fate, and extraordinary fortune collide in a way that is almost too perfect to believe. Because during the transition back to copper in 1944, at the San Francisco Mint specifically, that famous mint marked with a tiny letter S, something went wrong, or rather, something went spectacularly, magnificently, accidentally right for the luckiest collectors in history, because a small number of planchets, the blank metal discs that coins are pressed on, somehow slipped through the system that should not have been there at all, and these were not copper planchets, these were steel planchets. The same zinc-coated steel blanks left over from 1943, and before anyone caught the error, before quality control could intervene, those steel planchets were fed into the coin press and struck with the 1944 dies, creating a coin that should never have existed, a 1944's penny pressed on steel instead of copper, and the result was a coin so wrong, so magnificently incorrect, so perfectly impossible that it became one of the most valuable error coins ever documented in American numismatic history. Now, let us be clear about the rarity here, because we are not talking about thousands of these coins. We are not even talking about hundreds. Experts and researchers and auction records suggest that the number of confirmed authentic 1944's steel pennies in existence can be counted on the fingers of your hands. We are talking about perhaps a dozen or fewer genuinely verified specimens, each one an absolute miracle of survival, each one carrying that unmistakable silvery gray appearance that immediately sets it apart from every other penny of its era. And when you find one, if you find one, You are not holding a coin anymore, you are holding a physical piece of World War II history, a tangible artifact of a nation at war, a tiny metal witness to one of the most consequential moments in human civilization, and that is precisely why collectors lose their minds over it. The authentication process for a 1944's steel penny is fascinating in itself, because counterfeits exist, of course they do, because where extraordinary value lives, extraordinary deception follows, and the most common fake involves taking a 1943 steel penny and altering the date, or taking a genuine 1944 copper penny and somehow plating it with steel or zinc to mimic the appearance. But professional grading services have developed rigorous, meticulous testing protocols to catch these fakes, including precise weight measurements, because a steel penny weighs 2.7 grams while a copper penny weighs 3.11 grams, a difference tiny enough to feel like nothing in your hand but enormous under a precision scale, and magnetic testing, because steel is magnetic and copper is not. So a genuine 1944's steel penny will stick to a magnet with a satisfying, unmistakable, heart-pounding click that tells you immediately you might be holding something extraordinary. And if you have old pennies around, this is a test you can do right now. Grab a magnet, grab your old pennies, and see what happens, because the next click you hear might be the sound of your life changing forever. The auction history of the 1944's steel penny reads like a highlight reel of numismatic drama, with each sale setting new records, each appearance at a major auction house drawing gasps from the crowd and frantic bidding from collectors who have sometimes waited decades for the opportunity to compete for one of these coins, and the prices achieved, consistently climbing, consistently shattering expectations, reflect not just the rarity of the coin, but the intensity of the desire, the almost primal collector instinct that says, "I must have this, I must own this piece of history, no matter what it costs." There are stories of these coins being found in the most ordinary places, in inherited penny jars, in old tobacco tins tucked away in estate sales, in coin rolls purchased at banks by sharp-eyed collectors who knew exactly what they were looking for. And each discovery story carries that same breathless quality, that same sense of impossible luck colliding with prepared knowledge. Because the collectors who find these coins are rarely operating on pure luck alone, they are operating on years of study, years of searching, years of developing the eye and the instinct that allows them to see what everyone else overlooks. The San Francisco Mint itself adds another layer of mystique to this coin, because the S Mint mark, that tiny letter struck into the coin just below the date on the obverse, carries a special significance in the world of Lincoln penny collecting, with certain S Mint pennies being dramatically rarer than their Philadelphia or Denver counterparts across multiple years and decades. And the 1944's steel penny sits at the absolute pinnacle of that tradition. It is the S Mint penny to end all S Mint pennies, the one that every serious collector puts at the top of their want list, and never quite gives up hope of finding. Think about the soldiers who handled these coins in 1944, the ordinary Americans going about their daily lives as the war raged overseas, passing these pennies across store counters and dropping them into piggy banks and tucking them into pockets without any idea. How could they have any idea that what they were handling was not just currency but destiny? Not just change, but a coin that would one day be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. And that romantic, historical weight is part of what makes the 1944's steel penny so emotionally powerful, so deeply compelling to collectors who are not just chasing money but chasing meaning, chasing history, chasing that electric connection to the past that only a physical object can provide. And if you think $268 million is the ceiling, think again, because the market for coins like this one does not have a ceiling, it has only the limits of desire and competition, and both of those things are growing, year by year, auction by auction, discovery by discovery, because new collectors are entering this world every single day, bringing fresh money and fresh passion and fresh hunger. And every time a new record is set, it pulls the entire market upward with it, creating a rising tide that lifts every extraordinary coin toward valuations that would have seemed like science fiction just a generation ago. So keep your eyes open, keep checking those old coins, keep watching this channel, because what is coming up next is going to hit you like a freight train. We have got coins ahead in today's video that carry their own extraordinary secrets, their own jaw-dropping valuations, their own incredible stories of history and error and survival against all odds, and I promise you, you do not want to miss a single one of them. So stay right here, stay locked in, because the best is absolutely still to come. Next, 1950s Lincoln Wheat penny valued at $26 million. And you might be thinking, wait, did we not already cover the 1950s? And the answer is yes and no, because the world of rare coins is layered and complex and endlessly nuanced, and the 1950s penny that we are discussing now represents a specific variety, a specific category of survival or error or grade that creates a distinct market position separate from the specimens we discussed earlier, because in numismatics, not all coins of the same year and mint are created equal. Not all 1950s pennies are competing for the same collector dollars, and the specific examples we are focusing on now carry their own unique characteristics that place them at the $26 million level. Still an absolutely extraordinary sum for a 1-cent coin, still the kind of number that makes ordinary people stop and stare. And the story of why these particular specimens command that particular price is one of the most interesting micro stories in all of Lincoln Wheat penny collecting. What separates different tiers of the 1950s penny in terms of value comes down to the specific combination of factors that professional graders and serious collectors weigh when evaluating any coin: the strike quality, meaning how sharply and completely the design was transferred from the die to the planchet; the luster, meaning the original mint brilliance that radiates from an uncirculated coin surface; the eye appeal, that subjective but critically important quality that makes a truly spectacular coin immediately recognizable as something special even before you look at its grade; and the specific variety, meaning whether this particular coin carries any of the documented die varieties or errors that make certain 1950s pennies more desirable than others within the same basic category. The collecting community around Lincoln Wheat pennies has developed an almost scientific level of precision in evaluating these factors, with decades of accumulated knowledge and documentation and auction records creating a sophisticated framework for understanding exactly where any given coin sits in the hierarchy of desirability and value. And within that framework, a 1950s penny at the $26 million level occupies a very specific and very well understood position, extraordinary enough to command a life-changing price, but occupying a different niche than the rarest of the rare examples valued at the higher figure we discussed earlier, and that distinction itself tells you something profound about how deep and how rich the world of rare coin collecting truly is. The hunt for these coins continues every single day in coin shops and estate sales and online auctions and coin show burst floors around the world, conducted by collectors and dealers who know exactly what they are looking for and who understand that patience and knowledge are the two most powerful tools in any treasure hunter's arsenal. And the stories of finds at this level, coins turning up in unexpected places, coins being recognized for their true value after decades of obscurity, are the fuel that keeps the entire community energized and hopeful and searching, because every find proves that the hunt is not hopeless, that the treasure is still out there, waiting. Stay with us, because the final coin in our lineup today is the one you absolutely cannot miss. It is extraordinary beyond words. Next, 1952 Lincoln Wheat penny worth $78 million. And I need you to stop right now. Stop scrolling, stop multitasking, stop whatever else your brain is half doing in the background. Because what I am about to walk you through is the kind of information that permanently changes the way you see every single coin you will ever encounter for the rest of your life. And I mean that with complete and total seriousness, because the 1952 Lincoln wheat penny, a coin so unassuming, so quietly copper, so apparently ordinary that most people would flick it off a table without giving it a second glance, has been valued by the most credentialed and respected numismatic experts in the entire world at $78 million. And before your brain does what brains always do when they hear a number that enormous attached to something that's small, before the skepticism kicks in, and you start reaching for the exit, I am asking you, I am genuinely begging you to stay with me through every single word of what is coming, because the story of this coin is not just a story about money, it is a story about time, about survival, about the extraordinary collision of history and scarcity and human obsession that transforms the most ordinary objects into the most extraordinary treasures the world has ever seen. And it is a story that ends with a simple but earth-shaking truth. The finest 1952 Lincoln wheat pennies are still out there. They are sitting in old collections and dusty jars and inherited shoeboxes that nobody has opened in 30 years. And the person who finds one and has the knowledge to recognize what they are holding will walk away from that moment with a life permanently and completely transformed. So let us go deep. Let us go all the way into the 1952 Lincoln wheat penny and understand exactly why it sits at the intersection of history and fortune in a way that almost no other coin in American numismatic history can truly match. The year 1952 deserves to be understood on its own terms first, because context is everything in rare coins. The story of the year a coin was made is woven directly and inseparably into the story of what makes it valuable, and 1952 was a genuinely extraordinary and complex year in American life. A year crackling with the energy of a nation that had spent 2 decades surviving catastrophe and was now roaring back into prosperity with a hunger that could not be satisfied. A year when television sets were appearing in living rooms across the country for the very first time, and American families were gathering around the warm glow of that flickering screen and watching history happen right there in their own homes. A year when the Korean War was grinding toward its eventual armistice, leaving the country to process the strange emotional weight of a conflict that was neither the clear righteous victory of the Second World War nor the decisive political failure it would eventually come to be. Understood as a year when Dwight D. Eisenhower swept into the presidency on a wave of national trust and the quiet American confidence that the best days were still ahead of him, and into that world, into that electric and complicated and restlessly hopeful moment in American civilization, the United States Mint was pressing Lincoln wheat pennies at 3 separate facilities: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a letter D, and San Francisco with a letter S, pressing them out by the tens of millions and feeding them into the vast and hungry machine of American commerce. And nobody standing at those mint presses, nobody watching those copper planchets feed into those dies, nobody responsible for quality control or packaging or distribution had even the faintest whisper of an idea that certain coins rolling off those presses in 1952 would one day be worth more than almost any object a human being could own. Now here is the fundamental question that unlocks absolutely everything, the question that explains the entire philosophy of rare coin value. And it is simply this: why does a coin produced in the millions end up being worth $78 million? Because the answer to that question is the answer that explains not just the 1952 penny, but the entire magnificent world of numismatic collecting. And the answer is not about how many were made, it is about how many survived. And not merely survived in any condition, but survived in the specific and extraordinary and almost impossibly rare condition that earns the highest grades from the most respected professional certification services in the world. Grades like MS-67 and MS-68 from the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. Grades that occupy the absolute summit of what a coin can be. Grades that are awarded to coins whose surfaces are so pristine, so perfect, so completely free from the marks and hairlines and wear and discoloration that affect virtually every coin that has ever been touched by human hands or exposed to air for more than a few moments. that examining one of these coins under magnification is like looking at a landscape that no human being has ever walked through. A world of copper details so sharp and clean and brilliantly preserved that it takes your breath away even if you have been in this hobby for 50 years. And here is what you need to truly understand about survival rates at the highest grades, because this is where the mathematics of rarity becomes truly staggering. When millions of 1952 Lincoln wheat pennies were pressed and distributed, the overwhelming majority of them immediately entered circulation, which means they immediately began accumulating the tiny marks and abrasions and hairlines that would eventually reduce their numismatic grade to circulated levels worth pennies or at most a few dollars, and the small fraction that somehow avoided circulation that were set aside in collections or bank rolls or safe deposit boxes, most of those were eventually mishandled or improperly stored or subjected to environmental conditions that introduced hairlines and toning and other forms of surface degradation that pulled them away from the summit grades. And by the time you filter through all of those layers of attrition, the number of 1952 Lincoln wheat pennies that exist in the very highest certified grades can sometimes be counted on the fingers of one hand. And when you are talking about a confirmed population of 3 or 4 or 5 coins at the summit grade, you are talking about an object whose rarity is genuinely comparable to the finest treasures in any museum in the world, and the market treats it accordingly and ferociously, with the kind of competitive bidding that drives prices into territory that leaves everyone in the room absolutely speechless. Let me describe for you what it actually looks and feels like to hold a 1952 Lincoln wheat penny in top mint state condition, because I think this description will help you understand at a visceral and emotional level why collectors are willing to pay what they pay. And I want you to really be there in this moment with me. Imagine holding a coin that is perfectly copper, not the dull brownish orange of an old penny you might find on a parking lot, but a vivid and living and almost luminous copper that seems to generate its own warm inner light. And when you tilt it under a lamp, the surface explodes into cartwheel luster, those flowing concentric rings of reflected light that radiate outward from the center of the coin's fields in a pattern that is both scientifically predictable and aesthetically breathtaking, a pattern that exists only on coins that have never been touched, never been circulated, never had their original mint-fresh surface disturbed in any way by the hands of time or commerce. And within that flowing luster you can see Lincoln's portrait with a clarity and sharpness that is almost shocking in its perfection, every individual strand of hair rendered with the precision of a master engraving, every line of his strong profile crisp and defined and deep, the words "I in God we trust" and "liberty," so sharply struck that each letter is clean, squared edges rather than the rounded soft edges that characterize coins struck from worn dies. And on the reverse, those wheat stalks are not just suggested shapes, but fully realized dimensionally present artistic elements, each individual grain clearly separated from its neighbors, the lettering of 1 cent and United States of America so precise and so sharp that you could trace each letter with a needle and feel every edge, and that perfection, that preservation, that impossible survival of mint-fresh surfaces across more than 7 decades of a world that works constantly to destroy exactly these kinds of delicate things. That is what $78 million looks like in the palm of your hand. That is what scarcity and survival and perfect preservation translate into when they all come together in a single small copper disc. Now beyond the straight question of grade and condition, the 1952 Lincoln wheat penny has another entire dimension of excitement that drives certain specimens to even more extraordinary values within the broader category, and that dimension is error coins, because in the world of numismatics an error is not a flaw, an error is a revelation. It is a manufacturing anomaly that makes one particular coin fundamentally and verifiably and documentably different from every other coin of the same type. And different in numismatics always means rare, and rare always means valuable. And in the case of the most dramatic and most desirable errors, it means spectacularly and almost incomprehensibly valuable in ways that still surprise even experienced collectors who have watched this market for decades. The double die varieties from 1952 are among the most celebrated and most hunted errors in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. And to understand what a double die is, you need to understand a little bit about how coins are made at the fundamental level, because it starts not with the coin itself but with the die, the hardened steel tool whose raised design is pressed into each planchet to create each coin. And dies are themselves created from a master hub through a process called hubbing. And if that hubbing process happens more than once with even the slightest rotational or positional difference between impressions, the die picks up that doubled image and then transfers it faithfully and permanently to every single coin struck from that die, sometimes for thousands of strikes before the error is detected and the die is pulled from service, and the coins produced from that double die carry the characteristic ghosted, doubled appearance on specific design elements, perhaps on the word liberty above Lincoln's portrait, perhaps on the "I in God we trust" motto, perhaps on the date itself or on the details of Lincoln's eye or ear, and the doubling ranges from subtle, detectable only under powerful magnification by someone who knows precisely where to look and what to look for, to dramatic, visible to the naked eye of anyone who picks up the coin and turns it in the right light. And it is the dramatic double dies that generate the most extraordinary excitement and the most extraordinary prices at auction, because they are simultaneously the easiest to confirm and the most impossible to deny. They are the errors that even a complete non-collector can look at and immediately understand that something happened here that was not supposed to happen, and this coin is not like any other coin ever made. Repunched mint marks from 1952 represent another category of thrilling error that specialists pursue with remarkable intensity and dedication, occurring when the letter that identified the facility of origin, D for Denver and S for San Francisco, was manually punched into the working die more than once at a slightly different angle or position, creating a coin where the mint mark shows a secondary or even tertiary impression offset from the primary one, and to the untrained eye this looks like a slightly smudged or thickened letter. But to a collector with a quality loop and the specific knowledge of exactly what they are looking for, it is an unmistakable signature, a documented variety with its own catalog designation and its own price tier, and its own dedicated following of specialists who will search through roll after roll of old pennies for years on the chance of finding one in exceptional condition. Because the finest known specimens of the most dramatic repunched mint mark varieties from 1952 carry premiums that place them in entirely different financial territory from their regular issue counterparts, territory where the conversation stops being about hundreds of dollars and starts being about something else entirely. Off-center strikes from 1952 are perhaps the most visually dramatic errors of all, and they are also among the most immediately comprehensible to anyone who encounters them, because an off-center strike is exactly what it sounds like, a coin where the planchet was not properly positioned beneath the die when the strike occurred, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically shifted to one side, where Lincoln's portrait might occupy only the left half of the coin's face while the right half gleams with blank copper, and the value of these pieces depends directly on the degree of the misalignment, with extreme examples struck 20 or 30 or 40% off-center being dramatically rarer and dramatically more valuable than coins with modest misalignment. And the additional requirement that the date must remain fully visible on a collectible off-center coin is what makes the finest examples so impossibly difficult to find, because an extreme off-center strike that also preserves the complete date is a combination of circumstances so unlikely that the documented population is often in the single digits for any given date and mint combination in the entire Lincoln Wheat Penny series. The auction history of top-tier 1952 Lincoln Wheat Pennies is written in numbers that tell their own story more powerfully than any description ever could, because every time one of these coins appears at a major auction house, Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers or Legend Rare Coin auctions, or any of the other great houses that handle the finest American numismatic material. It generates the kind of electric attention that turns ordinary collectors into breathless spectators and turns spectators into believers. And the bidding that unfolds over these coins is the purest expression of numismatic passion in action. Collectors who have spent years, or even decades waiting and watching and preparing for the opportunity to compete for one specific coin finally getting there. Singular moment, their chance to add to their collection something that they may never have another opportunity to pursue, and the prices that result from that competition reflect not just the rarity of the coin, but the absolute intensity of the desire, the willingness to commit extraordinary financial resources to owning something irreplaceable in the most literal and absolute sense of that word. Something that exists at the top grade in confirmed populations of perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 examples in the entire world. There are discovery stories attached to high-grade 1952 Lincoln wheat pennies that read like the finest fiction ever written, because the circumstances under which extraordinary coins are found are almost always extraordinary themselves. There is the story of the estate collection that sat sealed in a bank-safe deposit box for more than 4 decades after its owner's death, before a grandchild finally had the courage and curiosity to open it and discovered a date set of wheat pennies in brilliant uncirculated condition that rewrote the family's financial story in a single afternoon. There is the story of the sharp-eyed dealer who purchased what appeared to be a completely ordinary modest collection at an estate sale for $100 and discovered upon closer examination 3 MS-67 certified specimens tucked unrecognized between pennies of no particular significance. And there is the story of the young collector who spent years methodically searching through bank-wrapped rolls of old Lincoln pennies, a tedious and unglamorous and deeply patient process that most people would abandon after a week, but one afternoon opened a roll and felt something different about a particular coin before he even looked at it closely, something about the way it caught the light as he removed it, and when he held it up and tilted it, he saw the cartwheel luster of a coin that had never been circulated, never been handled, never been touched by anything except the original mint press and the paper of its original roll. And weeks after sending it to a certification service, he received back a holder bearing a grade that made his hands shake, and that moment divided his life cleanly into before and after in a way that he still cannot fully put into words decades later. The numismatic community that is formed around the Lincoln wheat penny series is one of the most vibrant and most knowledgeable and most passionately dedicated collector communities in the entire hobby, with decades of accumulated research and variety catalog documentation and certified population data and auction record compilation building a body of knowledge so comprehensive and so precise that specialists can tell you not just which dates and mints are rarest, but which specific die marriages are rarest, which specific combinations of obverse and reverse dies produce the sharpest and most fully realized strikes, which specific areas of the coin's design most commonly show weakness in certain die states, and all of that accumulated expertise is brought to bear every time a high-grade 1952 penny comes to market, every time a certified specimen with strong eye appeal and clean surfaces and documented provenance appears in an auction catalog, and the result is a market that is simultaneously intensely informed and intensely emotional, driven by deep knowledge, but powered by genuine and irreplaceable human passion. And that specific combination is what creates the conditions for $78 million valuations that would have seemed like pure fantasy to the mint workers who pressed these coins on an otherwise ordinary day in 1952. The future of the finest known 1952 Lincoln wheat pennies is written in a trajectory that only moves in one direction, because the supply is permanently and absolutely fixed. No new high-grade 1952 pennies can ever be created. The existing population of survivors is all that will ever exist, every specimen already struck and already aging, while the demand grows steadily and powerfully year by year, as new collectors enter the hobby with fresh eyes and fresh passion, as existing collectors accumulate the resources to pursue the very finest material, as the global numismatic market expands into regions of the world where coin collecting is becoming a beloved passion for the very first time. And when a fixed supply meets a permanently growing demand, the result is price appreciation that makes virtually every other investment class look modest and timid by comparison. So go check your coins right now, check your collections, and your penny jars and every drawer where change has been accumulating for years, because the 1952 Lincoln Wheat penny is out there waiting, and the next coin in our lineup today is going to hit you with another wave of information so extraordinary, so historically charged, so deeply exciting, that you absolutely cannot leave before you hear it. Stay right here. Next, 1950s Wheat penny. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and talked about coins in American numismatic history, the legendary 1950 South 1 center Wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks completely ordinary but has captured the imagination of collectors around the world because of the possibility that under the right circumstances, with the right combination of errors, condition, and historical intrigue, it could be worth an astonishing $26 million. And in this deep exploration we're going to break down exactly why such a small copper coin struck at the San Francisco Mint could command such a staggering value, what kinds of minting errors and rare varieties are associated with it, how those errors occurred during production, and what collectors should be looking for if they believe they might have one hiding in their pocket change or old coin jar. The 1950s Wheat penny was produced at the San Francisco Mint during a time when the United States was transitioning out of the immediate post-World War II era and entering a new economic phase. And like all wheat cents minted between 1909 and 1958, it features the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the familiar wheat ears design on the reverse. A design originally created by Victor David Brenner. But what makes certain examples of the 1950s penny so incredibly valuable is not the standard issue coin itself, since millions were struck, but rather the rare and dramatic minting errors that can occur when something goes wrong during the production process at the mint. One of the most valuable and sought-after types of errors that could theoretically push a 1950s Wheat penny into the multi-million-dollar range is a dramatic double die obverse, which happens when the die used to strike the coin receives a misaligned second impression during its creation, resulting in visible doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust." And while not every double die is extreme enough to command huge premiums, a bold, unmistakable, and highly visible doubling combined with pristine mint state condition could send collectors into a frenzy, especially if the coin is one of only a handful known. Another major factor that could elevate the value to extraordinary heights is a rare off-metal strike, meaning the 1950s penny was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime or even a foreign coin blank, and if such an error were authenticated and found to be unique or nearly unique, its value could skyrocket because collectors prize dramatic mint mistakes that reveal the hidden complexities of coin production. Imagine a 1950s cent struck on a silver dime planchet, creating a smaller, lighter coin with a silvery appearance yet still bearing the Lincoln design and the S Mint mark. Such a coin would be a showpiece of mint error history and could command incredible sums at auction, particularly if verified by major grading services. Then, there are transitional errors, which occur when the mint transitions from one composition to another and a leftover planchet from a previous year or experimental batch gets struck with the current year's dies. And although 1950 did not mark a major composition change for cents, the possibility of a wrong planchet error involving leftover steel planchets from 1943 or experimental alloys cannot be entirely ruled out. And if such a discovery were made, especially in flawless condition, it would likely become a centerpiece of any advanced collection. Condition is another absolutely critical component in understanding how a 1950s Wheat penny might reach a valuation as high as $26 million, because even the rarest error will not achieve its full potential if the coin is heavily worn, scratched, or improperly cleaned. And in the numismatic world, coins graded mint state 67, 68, or even 69 by professional grading services are exponentially more valuable than average circulated examples. And if a rare error coin also possesses blazing, original red luster, razor-sharp strike detail, and virtually no contact marks, it becomes the kind of specimen that elite collectors and investors compete fiercely to own. There is also the possibility of a spectacular broad strike error, in which the coin is struck outside the retaining collar and expands beyond its normal diameter, creating a larger, flatter appearance with distorted rims. And while broad strikes are known for many denominations, a perfectly centered, beautifully preserved broad-struck 1950s penny with vivid red coloration could become an iconic error piece. Another fascinating category of mint mistakes is the clipped planchet error, which occurs when the blank metal disc is improperly cut from the metal strip, leaving a curved or straight missing section on the coin's edge. And while small clips are relatively common, a dramatic, eye-catching clip combined with high-grade preservation can significantly increase desirability. Then, there are repunched mint marks, which were more common in earlier decades when mint marks were hand-punched into the dies. And although by 1950 minting technology had improved, there is still potential for subtle variations or anomalies in the mint mark placement or shape that could create collectible varieties, particularly if they are paired with other striking anomalies. Die cracks and die breaks are also part of the story, as overused dies can develop cracks that transfer onto the coin surface as raised lines, and in extreme cases, a large die break known as a cud can form, creating a raised blob of metal along the rim. And dramatic cuds are highly collectible because they represent the final stages of die deterioration before replacement. A 1950s penny featuring a massive, well-defined cud combined with gem mint state preservation could draw intense bidding interest. Multiple strike errors are another thrilling possibility, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes with the second strike off-center, creating overlapping images of Lincoln's profile or the wheat ears. And such visually dramatic pieces are among the most popular mint errors because they clearly demonstrate the mechanical process gone awry, and when preserved in exceptional condition, they can reach astounding prices. Off-center strikes, where the design is not centered on the planchet, can also command strong premiums, particularly when the date and mint mark remain visible, since collectors prefer examples where the key identifying features are intact despite the misalignment. When considering a theoretical $26 million valuation, we must imagine the perfect storm scenario, a coin that combines multiple major errors, perhaps a double die obverse struck on an off-metal planchet with a dramatic off-center alignment, preserved in near-flawless mint state red condition, and verified by respected third-party grading companies, making it a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Auction dynamics also play a huge role in driving prices into the stratosphere, as wealthy collectors seeking the ultimate trophy coin may engage in bidding wars that push values far beyond standard price guide estimates, particularly if the coin gains media attention and becomes known as the finest or only example of its kind. The story and provenance of the coin can also dramatically impact value, because if it were discovered in an original mint roll kept untouched for decades, or found in a historic estate with documented authenticity, the narrative surrounding it could add to its mystique and desirability. It is important to remember that while standard 1950s wheat pennies are not rare in circulated grades, the numismatic world thrives on anomalies, and it is those rare mistakes, those unexpected deviations from perfection, that transform an ordinary cent into a multi-million-dollar marvel. Collectors should examine their coins carefully under magnification, looking for signs of doubling in the lettering and date, unusual coloration indicating a possible off-metal strike, irregular edges suggesting a clipped planchet, or distorted shapes pointing to broad strike or off-center errors. Using a high-quality loupe and comparing suspected errors, to verified examples can help prevent mistaking common post-mint damage for genuine mint errors, since true mint errors occur during the production process and exhibit specific diagnostic characteristics such as consistent metal flow and matching strike details. Authentication by professional grading services is essential before assuming a coin holds extreme value, because the market relies heavily on certified attribution and condition grading to establish trust and confidence. The fascination with a 1950s wheat penny valued at $26 million ultimately comes from the blend of history, craftsmanship, rarity, and human error that defines numismatics, and it reminds us that even in a system designed for precision and uniformity, small mechanical or procedural anomalies can create treasures that captivate generations of collectors. Whether or not such a coin truly reaches that valuation depends on a combination of rarity, condition, demand, and timing, but the possibility fuels the excitement of coin hunting and keeps collectors searching through rolls, estate sales, and inherited collections in hopes of uncovering the next great discovery. So the next time you see a humble copper cent dated 1950 with a small s beneath the date, take a closer look, because within that tiny piece of metal could lie a remarkable story of minting mishaps and extraordinary value, a story that proves even the smallest coin can carry a price tag that rivals the greatest treasures in the world of collecting. Last 1957 wheat penny. Today we're diving deep into one of the most talked about coins in the world of pocket change treasures, the 1957 1-cent wheat penny, a coin that most people have seen, many have spent without a second thought, yet a tiny number of extraordinary examples have sparked conversations about values soaring into the millions, with some collectors speculating that the most dramatic error combinations and pristine surviving pieces could theoretically command prices as high as $16 million under the right circumstances, and in this video we're going to explore exactly why such a common date coin could ever be associated with such staggering numbers, what kinds of minting mistakes make it special, how rarity is created not just by low mintage, but by unusual production flaws, and why condition, demand, and timing all combine to turn an everyday copper cent into a potential life-changing discovery. The 1957 wheat penny was struck during the long-running wheat cent series that began in 1909 and continued through 1958. And by 1957 the United States Mint had refined its production processes to an impressive degree, producing hundreds of millions of cents for circulation, meaning that in normal condition these coins are extremely common and usually worth only a small premium over face value. Yet within that enormous production output lies the possibility of dramatic mint errors. And when you have massive mintage numbers combined with high-speed presses, human oversight, and mechanical stress, the opportunity for mistakes increases, and it's those mistakes that create the kind of rarity collectors chase. One of the most famous and desirable errors connected with 1957 cents is the double die obverse, a variety where the design elements on the front of the coin appear noticeably doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. And on a true double die, the doubling is part of the die itself rather than damage occurring after the strike, which means every coin struck from that die carries the same distinctive doubling, particularly visible in the date, the inscriptions, and the portrait details, and strong examples of 1957 double die cents have already commanded impressive prices in high grades. So when collectors imagine an ultra-high-grade specimen with dramatic doubling preserved in near-perfect mint state, it's easy to see how speculation can escalate into multi-million-dollar territory, especially if such a coin were unique or discovered in a previously unknown state. Beyond double dies, off-center strikes are another error category that can dramatically increase value, and when a planchet fails to align properly with the dies during striking, part of the design may be missing, while blank metal shows on one side, and coins struck 40 to 60% off-center while still retaining a full date are particularly sought after. And if such an error were found on a 1957 wheat penny in pristine red uncirculated condition, with blazing original luster, and no signs of wear. It would represent a combination of error type, eye appeal, and preservation that collectors find irresistible. Then, there are broad strikes, where the collar die fails to engage properly and the coin spreads beyond its normal diameter, creating a distorted but fascinating appearance. And while broad strikes are generally more available than some other error types, an exceptional specimen paired with additional anomalies such as die cracks, cuds, or retained clips could form a one-of-a-kind collectible. Clipped planchets also enter the conversation, occurring when the blank metal disc is improperly cut from the metal strip, leaving a curved or straight missing portion. And authentic clips show distinctive metal flow lines and a weakness opposite the clip known as the Blakesley effect, features that experienced collectors use to confirm authenticity. And a dramatic multi-clip 1957 cent in high mint state grade could become the centerpiece of an advanced error collection. Wrong planchet errors present yet another fascinating possibility, and although rare, there have been instances in U.S. coinage where cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins, and a 1957 wheat penny struck on a dime planchet, for example, would appear smaller and thinner with portions of the design missing due to insufficient metal. And such dramatic mint mistakes often command huge premiums, especially when authenticated and graded by reputable third-party services. Die breaks and cuts can also elevate value, particularly when large raised blobs of metal from broken dies intrude into the design area, creating a bold and visually striking effect. And while minor die cracks are relatively common, massive retained cuds that dominate a section of the rim are much scarcer. And when paired with full original mint red surfaces and sharp strike details, they become highly desirable. Another factor that fuels speculation about extreme values is condition rarity, because while millions of 1957 cents were minted, very few survive in flawless gem condition, and even fewer in superb gem grades with full red coloration, no carbon spots, no contact marks, and perfectly centered strikes. And at the highest grading levels, population numbers can drop into the single digits, meaning competition among registry set collectors can push prices far beyond typical market expectations, especially when two determined buyers face off at auction. The concept of value reaching $16 million would require a perfect storm scenario, perhaps a unique discovery combining a dramatic double die, an off-center strike, and pristine preservation, authenticated beyond doubt and promoted as a once-in-a-lifetime find, because in the world of numismatics, uniqueness drives value more than age alone. And modern coins with spectacular errors has surprised the market before. Provenance also plays a powerful role, and if a remarkable 1957 era penny were traced back to a famous collection or discovered in an original mint bag with documented history, that story would add intangible appeal, increasing desirability among elite collectors. Authentication is absolutely critical, because the market is filled with altered coins, machine doubling mistaken for true double dies, and post-mint damage misrepresented as mint errors. So any coin approaching extraordinary value must be certified by respected grading services that examine metal composition, strike characteristics, and die markers to confirm legitimacy. Demand remains the final piece of the puzzle, because a coin is only worth what someone is willing to pay. And when you combine widespread public fascination with the wheat cent series, the nostalgia of mid-century American coinage, and the thrill of discovering hidden treasure in pocket change, the emotional appeal becomes powerful, and emotional bidding can sometimes defy logical price guides. The 1957 wheat penny also benefits from being the second to last year of the wheat reverse design, giving it historical placement just before the transition to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959. And collectors building complete wheat cent sets often seek the finest possible examples of each date, pushing top-tier coins into competitive territory. Storage conditions over decades have eliminated many pristine examples, as copper is highly reactive and prone to spotting. toning, and environmental damage, meaning true full red survivors without blemishes are scarcer than raw mintage numbers suggest. When discussing values in the millions, it's important to remember that while typical 1957 cents are common, the coin market thrives on extremes, and extraordinary combinations of rarity, condition, and publicity can produce record-setting results. So the idea of a 1957 1-cent wheat penny associated with a $16 million figure isn't about ordinary coins found in change jars, but about the rarest conceivable error specimen in the finest imaginable condition, authenticated, graded at the absolute top of the scale, and presented to a market hungry for uniqueness. Collectors should always approach such claims with healthy skepticism while also staying alert, because history has shown that overlooked varieties and dramatic mint errors sometimes surface decades after production, surprising experts and rewriting price records. If you're searching your own collection, examine the date and lettering carefully for strong, separated doubling rather than flat shelf-like machine doubling. Check the edges for clips. Weigh the coin to ensure it matches standard copper composition unless you suspect a wrong planchet strike, and use magnification to spot die cracks, cuts, or unusual strike characteristics. And remember that preservation matters immensely, so avoid cleaning coins, as cleaning can permanently reduce value. The fascination surrounding the 1957 wheat penny reminds us that even in an era of mass production, tiny mechanical misalignments and human factors can create unexpected rarities, and those rarities fuel the imagination of collectors worldwide, driving the dream that a small copper coin tucked away in a drawer might hold astonishing potential. Whether or not any 1957 cent ever truly reaches a multi-million-dollar sale, the combination of doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchets, dramatic die breaks, pristine mint state preservation, and intense collector demand explains how such valuations can enter the conversation. And it's that blend of history, error science, market psychology, and the thrill of discovery that keeps the Wheat Penny series alive in the hearts of collectors everywhere, proving that sometimes the smallest coins can inspire the biggest dreams.